The training grounds of the Galactic Military Academy stretched out like a massive metal and glass cathedral. Towers rose high into the artificial sky, and the sounds of combat echoed from every direction. Warriors from 100 different worlds trained here, pushing themselves to become the strongest soldiers in the galaxy. The academy had a reputation. Those who graduated from this place became legends. Those who failed never spoke of it again. Kieran stood in the center of the training field, with his arms crossed over his wide chest. He was a Vortaxian, a species known for their physical strength and warrior culture. His purple skin gleamed with sweat from the morning exercises. His 4 eyes, arranged in a square pattern on his face, scanned the newest batch of cadets arriving for their first day. Most of them looked nervous. Some looked afraid. That was good. Fear kept soldiers alert. One of the cadets walking toward him caught Kieran's attention immediately. She was small, very small. Her skin was a pale tan color, and she had only 2 eyes like some of the weaker species. She wore the uniform of the academy, but it hung on her small frame like clothes made for a child. Kieran's mandibles clicked together in what might have been a laugh. "What is this?" Kieran called out loudly. "Who let the cleaning staff into the cadet ranks?" The other cadets stopped and turned to look. The small human woman kept walking toward him, her face calm and neutral. She stood in line with the other new recruits, most of whom were twice her size. A Krillian cadet with thick green skin and 4 arms stood next to her. A Cathara soldier with sharp teeth and golden eyes stood on her other side. And between them was this tiny human, looking like she had gotten lost on her way to the Academy's food service department. "State your name and origin," Kieran said, walking around her slowly like a predator examining its prey. "Minho," she said quietly. "From Earth." Kieran's 4 eyes widened slightly. "Earth? That little blue and brown ball at the edge of the Andromeda sector? The one with all the primitive wildlife?" He turned to face the other cadets. "This is what happens when the Academy tries to be inclusive. We are soldiers, warriors, the elite fighters of the galaxy. And they send us—" He gestured at Minho with obvious disgust. "This." A few of the cadets laughed. Some looked uncomfortable, glancing away. Minho simply stood still, her eyes forward, her posture correct. "I am Kieran," he continued, pacing back and forth. "I will be your combat instructor. My job is to make you strong enough to survive in the galaxy's most dangerous situations. But some of you will not survive my training." His gaze fixed on Minho. "Some of you will break. Some of you will realize you are not cut out for this life, and you will wash out before the month is over." Kieran pointed directly at Minho. "I am making a public prediction right now, and I want all of you to remember this moment. That one will not last 3 weeks. Humans are fragile creatures, delicate, weak. They were not designed for combat. Their bones are thin, their muscles are soft, and their minds are not built for the mental challenges of real military training. She will cry. She will ask to go home. And she will fail." Minho did not respond. She did not look at Kieran. She simply stood there waiting for her next instruction. "Well," Kieran shouted, "do you have nothing to say? Will you not beg to return to your primitive planet?" "No, sir," Minho said quietly. "I am ready to train." "Ha!" Kieran's laugh was harsh and loud. "Ready to train? That is almost cute." He turned to address all the cadets. "Listen to me. The Academy accepted this human to fill our diversity quota. I do not expect her to last. I do not expect her to contribute. But I will give her the chance to prove me wrong. Just do not embarrass the rest of you in the process." The first day of training was brutal. Kieran made sure of it. He ran the cadets through endurance exercises until several of them collapsed. He tested their strength with weighted armor and combat simulations. He pushed them to their physical and mental limits, and he watched Minho carefully, waiting for the moment when she would break. But Minho did not break. She was not the fastest. She was not the strongest. When the Krillian cadet with 4 arms lifted a training weight that Minho could barely budge, Kieran smiled with satisfaction. This was proof. This was confirmation. The human was weak. Yet something strange happened. When Kieran assigned the cadets to solve a complex tactical problem, Minho finished first. Her solution was elegant and efficient. When he required them to memorize the locations of 50 different weapons and their specifications, Minho could recite them all perfectly. When he made them sit in silent meditation for an hour to test their mental discipline, Minho sat perfectly still, her breathing calm and even, while 2 other cadets could not complete the exercise. By the end of the first week, Kieran had run out of obvious ways to prove Minho's weakness. He adjusted his strategy. He began assigning her the most humiliating tasks. She cleaned the equipment storage room while the other cadets trained in advanced combat. She organized the medical supplies while others studied tactical strategy. She scrubbed the floors of the training grounds while her classmates learned about energy weapons. Minho completed every task without complaint. She never asked why she was being treated differently. She never argued or complained. She simply did what was asked and returned to her barracks each night. One evening, Kieran found himself in the Academy's observation tower, looking out over the training grounds. The sun was setting over the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. He saw Minho walking back from the equipment storage room, her uniform damp with sweat, her shoulders straight despite the obvious exhaustion in her steps. A Cathara soldier named Tara approached Kieran in the tower. She was one of the better cadets, smart and observant. "Sir," Tara said, "why are you assigning Minho only maintenance tasks? She solved the tactical problem faster than any cadet in her group. Her physical conditioning is improving daily. By any objective measure, she is performing better than half the class." Kieran's mandibles clicked. "Because she is weak. Because she does not belong here. Because I am testing whether she has the pride to stand up to me, and she does not." "Or perhaps," Tara said carefully, "she is disciplined enough to know that pride is a distraction. Perhaps she is strong enough to survive your challenges without needing to prove it." Kieran did not respond. He simply continued watching Minho walk across the grounds below, her small figure growing smaller as she moved toward the distant barracks. He had made a public bet that she would fail. He had declared that humans were weak and delicate. He had staked his reputation on her weakness. But as the weeks passed and Minho continued to show up, continued to improve, continued to endure every challenge he threw at her without breaking, Kieran began to feel something unfamiliar. It was not quite doubt. It was not quite respect. It was the uncomfortable feeling of not understanding something, and that feeling made him uneasy. Minho had now been at the academy for 2 weeks. She had surpassed Kieran's prediction of her failure by 7 days. And somehow that made him more determined to prove himself right, no matter what the evidence suggested. 3 weeks into the training program, Tara sat in the Academy's vast computer library, surrounded by glowing screens and data terminals. Most cadets avoided this place because it was quiet and boring compared to the excitement of the training grounds. But Tara was not like most cadets. Her mind worked best when it had access to information, and there was something about Minho that made her curious. The Cathara soldier's golden eyes scanned through Earth's historical records, reading about the planet's climate, its weather patterns, and the species that lived there. What she found was shocking. The data showed massive storms, severe hurricanes, and weather systems that would kill most species in minutes. How did humans survive on such a dangerous planet? How had they built a civilization in a place where nature itself seemed determined to destroy them? Tara pulled up more files, searching deeper into the Academy's restricted database. She expected the computer to block her access, but something strange happened. The files opened without protest, and what she found inside made her heart race. The classified documents contained information about Earth's human population and their unique characteristics. Not just their physical structure, but something more specific. Something that had been documented and studied by the Galactic Council. The files contained detailed notes about human storm chasing, human storm hunting, human expeditions into the most dangerous weather systems in their solar system. There were videos, too. Images of tiny human figures standing in the path of massive weather events that defied belief. Tara watched a recording of a human storm chase. A group of humans in a specially designed vehicle drove directly toward a massive rotating cloud system. A tornado, the text called it. The winds were strong enough to flip houses. The lightning was powerful enough to create lightning bolts that stretched across the entire sky. And the humans drove toward it, deliberately, with instruments and cameras, studying it, learning from it. "This cannot be real," Tara whispered to herself, but the more she watched, the more it became clear. This was not just a hobby for humans. This was a way of life. This was a skill that was passed down through families and generations. On Earth, the people who hunted storms were not crazy. They were respected. They were warriors in their own way. Tara closed the files and sat back in her chair. This changed everything. She thought about Minho's calm during the brutal training exercises. She remembered the way the human moved with such control and precision. She thought about how Minho read situations before they happened, how she predicted what Kieran would do next, how she seemed to understand danger in a way that other cadets did not. What if Minho was not weak at all? What if she was simply someone who had grown up in danger and learned to face it without fear? Over the next few days, Tara began spreading quiet information among the senior cadets. She did not speak about the files openly, but she mentioned things in conversation. She asked questions about Earth that made other cadets curious. She pointed out that Minho's calm under pressure was not the same as weakness. Some cadets listened, some dismissed her words, but seeds of doubt about Kieran's judgment began to grow. Meanwhile, Kieran continued to test Minho with increasingly difficult assignments. He put her in combat simulations where she faced opponents much larger and stronger than herself. She lost every time, of course. She did not have the strength to overpower her opponents. But she had something else. She seemed to understand how combat would flow before it happened. She moved with efficiency, avoiding wasted energy. She lasted longer in the simulations than many of the stronger cadets, even though she could not win. One afternoon, Kieran was reviewing training data when he noticed something odd. In a combat simulation with a Krillian opponent, Minho had predicted 3 of the Krillians' moves before they happened. Her defensive positions were always exactly where the attack came from. It was as if she could read the future. Kieran studied the simulation again and again, trying to find the answer. Was she just lucky? Was there something in her training data that gave him hints? But there was nothing. She was simply better at predicting what others would do than they were at deciding what to do. That same day, Kieran found himself standing near the observation viewport on the Academy's main floor. A massive storm system was moving across the nearby planet, dark clouds swirling with dangerous energy. Lightning flashed inside the clouds, and even from this distance, Kieran could see the power of the storm. It was a beautiful and terrible thing, a display of raw natural force. Minho walked past, and Kieran noticed that she stopped to look at the storm, too. Her expression changed. For the first time since she arrived at the Academy, Kieran saw something in her face that was not neutral or controlled. There was something like longing, something like recognition, something like she was looking at an old friend. "What are you looking at?" Kieran asked. Minho did not answer immediately. She watched the storm for a few more seconds, her eyes tracking the lightning bolts as they lit up the darkness. Then she smiled, a small, private smile, and she turned away. "Just remembering home," she said quietly. "Home," Kieran repeated. "That weak planet with weak weather?" Minho glanced back at him. "No," she said. "That is not my home at all." Then she walked away, leaving Kieran standing alone in front of the storm, wondering what he did not understand. That night, Kieran made a decision. He would push Minho harder. He would test her further. He would find the point where she broke, because she had to break eventually. Everyone had a breaking point. Everyone had a limit. Minho was human, which meant she was fragile and weak, no matter what Tara suggested or what strange calm she showed during training. But as Kieran lay in his quarters, trying to sleep, he could not shake the memory of Minho's expression when she looked at that storm. It was not the expression of someone looking at something dangerous and frightening. It was the expression of someone looking at home. In the library, Tara continued to read through restricted files, learning more about Earth and its storms. She read about something called the monsoon season, about cyclones that could strip buildings from their foundations, about lightning that could reach temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. And she read about humans who not only survived these things, but sought them out. She read about Minho's family. They were listed in the Earth records as elite storm hunters. They had tracked more than 100 major weather events. They had survived situations that would have killed any other species multiple times over. They had done this not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Tara closed the computer terminal and sat in the darkness of the library. She smiled to herself. Kieran had made a mistake, a very large, very public mistake. He had assumed that weakness was the same as being small. He did not understand that some of the most dangerous things in the universe came in small packages. The mandatory wilderness survival exercise was supposed to test the cadets' ability to survive on an alien world with minimal equipment and resources. The Academy had chosen a planet called Vex 7, a world with dangerous wildlife, toxic plants, and unpredictable weather. The exercise would last for 5 days, and the cadets would be dropped off in groups of 20 with a basic survival kit and a senior instructor. Kieran led Minho's group, and he smiled with satisfaction at this assignment. A wilderness survival exercise was a perfect place to finally break her. The planet's surface was rough and rocky, with sharp stone formations jutting up from the ground like broken teeth. The sky was a dull brown color, and the air felt thick and difficult to breathe. In the distance, mountains rose up toward a hazy horizon. The cadets set up a temporary camp in a sheltered area between two large rock formations, and Kieran began assigning them tasks. For the first 2 days, nothing unusual happened. The cadets gathered food, built shelters, and learned to work together in small groups. Minho performed her assigned tasks efficiently, never complaining, never asking for help. She gathered more food than some of the larger cadets. She helped construct the shelter with careful attention to structure and stability. Kieran watched her constantly, waiting for some sign of weakness, some moment of fear or doubt. On the morning of the 3rd day, everything changed. The sky that had been dull brown turned dark gray, then almost black. The wind picked up, moving from a gentle breeze to something that pushed at the cadets' bodies with real force. The temperature dropped rapidly, and the air took on an electric quality that made the fur on Kieran's skin stand on end. "There is a storm coming," one of the senior weather monitoring cadets said, checking his instruments. "The sensors show this is not possible. The storm system is moving faster than our models predicted. It will be here in less than 2 hours." Kieran felt a flutter of concern, but he pushed it down. He was a Vortaxian warrior. He had survived worse than a simple storm. "We secure the camp. We gather the supplies. We wait it out in the shelter. This is a test, and we will pass it." The wind grew stronger. The first drops of rain began to fall, large and heavy, striking the ground with audible impacts. The cadets worked quickly to secure their shelter and gather their supplies. But there was an edge of panic in their movements now, a sense that something was wrong. Something was not right about this storm. Minho stood at the edge of the camp, looking up at the sky. The other cadets were working frantically, but she simply stood there, her head tilted back, her eyes tracking something that Kieran could not see. "Minho!" Kieran shouted. "Stop wasting time and help secure the supplies!" Minho turned to look at him. Her expression was completely calm. More than calm, it was focused. It was the expression of someone looking at a familiar problem. "We need to move," she said. "We need to move now. This location is not safe." "We are not moving," Kieran replied, his authority absolute. "We have established our camp here. We have supplies. We have shelter. We stay." "The storm," Minho said, and her voice carried a certainty that made even Kieran pause. "The wind patterns are wrong. This is not a simple storm. This is I do not know the word in your language, a rotating wind system. Very large, very dangerous. The valley ahead is in its direct path." "How do you know this?" Kieran demanded. "You have never been to this planet. Our meteorological equipment shows no danger that would require evacuation." "I know because of how the clouds move," Minho said. "I know because of the way the wind is shifting direction. I know because my ancestors survived situations like this for thousands of years on my homeworld." Kieran looked at the mountains in the distance. They were high and could provide shelter if the storm became too severe. But to reach them would require moving through open ground, and moving through open ground in a powerful storm was dangerous. "Everyone into the shelter," Kieran commanded. "We wait here. That is an order." The cadets scrambled to follow his instructions, all of them except Minho. She walked to the edge of the camp and looked at the sky again, her hands clenched into fists. She was calculating something, Kieran realized. She was thinking through possibilities and outcomes. The wind became a roaring force. The rain turned into sheets of water that fell sideways, driven by winds so powerful that they knocked a cadet off his feet. The shelter that had seemed so solid began to shake. And then, with a sound like the breaking of thunder, a visible column of rotating wind appeared on the horizon, moving toward them across the rocky terrain. Panic erupted in the camp. Cadets screamed. The Krillian with 4 arms tried to secure supplies that were already being blown away by the wind. A young Cathara female fell to her knees, overwhelmed by fear. "Move!" Minho suddenly shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Move to the northern stone formations! They are higher! They will provide better shelter! Move now!" Some cadets looked at Kieran. He was the senior instructor. He should give the orders. But Kieran was frozen, staring at the rotating column of wind that was growing closer and more terrible by the second. It was clear now that this was no ordinary storm. This was something beyond his experience, beyond his training, beyond his understanding. "Listen to her!" Tara shouted. She had already started moving toward the northern formations that Minho indicated. Other cadets followed, their survival instincts overriding their obedience to rank. Minho was already moving, positioning herself to help the weakest cadets up the rough stone slope. She moved with purpose and confidence, her hands reaching out to grab cadets and pull them toward safety. She knew where to step. She knew how to move with the wind instead of against it. She moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Kieran finally snapped out of his shock and began helping to move the remaining cadets toward the northern formations. The wind was so powerful now that it was hard to walk. The rain was like needles against his skin. But he and Minho worked together, getting every single cadet to the higher ground. As they reached the shelter of the stone formations, the rotating wind column passed directly through where their camp had been. It tore apart the shelter they had built. It scattered their supplies across the landscape. It destroyed everything they had created with stunning, terrifying speed. But the cadets were safe. All of them. Because Minho had read the sky and understood what was coming. Because she had moved them to safety before Kieran even understood there was danger. As the storm raged around them, protected by the stone formations, Kieran stood and looked at Minho. She was sitting calmly, watching the storm with an expression of complete peace, as if she were simply watching an old friend pass by. In that moment, something shifted in Kieran's mind. Something fundamental changed in the way he understood what weakness meant and what strength actually was. The return to the academy was silent. The cadets who had survived the storm sat in the transport ship, many of them still shaking from their experience. Kieran sat separately, his 4 eyes staring at nothing, his large Vortaxian body looking smaller somehow than it had before the exercise began. When the transport landed and the cadets disembarked, they found the Academy's commanding officers waiting for them. News of the incident had already spread through the Academy network. The weather monitoring systems had detected the storm after it was already upon the cadets. The exercise had been shut down. All other groups had been ordered to return to base immediately. There would be an official inquiry into how the cadets had survived when none of the other groups had been given the warning in time. Commander Valix, the head of the entire academy, was a tall being with crystalline skin that caught the light and refracted it into rainbow patterns. Her voice was calm, but carried tremendous authority. She stood at the head of the inquiry board, looking at Kieran and his cadets. "You will each provide a statement about what happened during the exercise," she said. "You will explain how you survived when other groups had to be evacuated due to equipment failure. And you will explain how you predicted the danger before our meteorological systems registered it." Kieran stepped forward. "Commander, I made decisions based on—" "I did not ask you to speak," Commander Valix said. "I asked the cadets. Minho, come forward." Minho stood and walked to the front of the inquiry board. The other cadets watched her. Some of them were nervous about what she might say. Some of them were grateful. All of them were curious to hear her explanation. "Tell us," Commander Valix said, "how you knew to move the group before the storm reached you." "I read the sky," Minho said simply. Her voice was steady and calm, just as it had been during the storm. "Explain what you mean by that," Commander Valix said. Minho took a breath. It was clear that she was deciding whether to tell the truth or to keep the details of her homeworld secret. The other cadets held their breath, waiting. "My homeworld is called Earth," Minho began. "It is located in a region of space where the climate is not stable, where the weather is not predictable in the way that most stable worlds experience it. There are storms on Earth that are so powerful they can destroy cities. There are wind systems called hurricanes that form over water and move across land, destroying everything in their path. There are rotating wind systems called tornadoes that drop from the sky without warning and tear apart the ground." The inquiry board members looked at each other. This was not information any of them had. Commander Valix's expression remained neutral, but her crystalline skin flickered with subtle color shifts that indicated surprise. "How did your people survive if the climate is so dangerous?" one of the board members asked. "We adapted," Minho said. "We learned to read the sky. We learned to understand what the clouds tell us, what the wind tells us, what the air pressure tells us. We learned to predict where the storms will go. And then, we began to study them. We created a practice called storm hunting. We became skilled at moving through these storms, surviving them, and learning from them." Tara stepped forward. "Commander, I have accessed the restricted files about Earth in the Academy database. What Minho says is true. Storm hunting is not a hobby on Earth. It is a profession. It is a skill that is passed down through families. Minho comes from a family of elite storm hunters. She was trained in storm recognition and survival from childhood." Commander Valix's crystalline skin shifted through several colors rapidly. This was information that changed everything about how the Academy understood humanity and about how they understood Minho. "You are telling me," Commander Valek said slowly, "that your species has evolved to not only survive in dangerous storms, but to deliberately seek them out." "Yes," Minho said. "On Earth, the people who are best at reading storms and surviving them are considered to be among the most skilled warriors of our species. It is an honor to be a storm hunter." Kieran, who had been standing silently, made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a choke. All eyes turned toward him. "What do you have to say, Instructor Kieran?" Commander Valek asked. Kieran began, and then he stopped. There were words he wanted to say, but they would not come. He had mocked Minho as weak and delicate. He had publicly bet that she would be the first to wash out. He had assigned her humiliating tasks to try to break her spirit. And all the while, she was the only one in the entire exercise group who was actually trained for the situation they encountered. "I was wrong," Kieran said finally. The words came out quietly, almost like a question. "That is not the statement of a warrior," Commander Valek said. "But it is the truth. You made assumptions based on appearance. You made predictions based on prejudice. The Cadet Minho is stronger than any Vortaxian warrior I have trained. She is stronger than many of the species represented in this academy. And she is strong not because of her physical size, but because she has studied and mastered something real, something that matters." Minho stood quietly, watching the proceedings. She did not look angry. She did not look triumphant. She looked like someone who had simply done what needed to be done, and now the consequences of those actions were unfolding around her. "Cadet Minho," Commander Valek said, "you will be released from all maintenance duties immediately. You will be given full cadet status, equal to all other trainees. You will be assigned to advanced training programs immediately. And you will be offered a position as an assistant instructor in our Meteorological and Environmental Survival Division if you are interested in such a position." "I am interested," Minho said. Commander Valek turned her attention to Kieran. "Instructor Kieran, you will undergo a retraining program focused on removing bias from your judgment and teaching you to recognize that strength comes in many forms. You will maintain your position as an instructor only as long as you demonstrate that you have learned this lesson. Do you understand?" "Yes, Commander," Kieran said. As the inquiry concluded and the cadets were dismissed, Kieran stood alone for a moment, watching Minho leave the room with Tara at her side. The other cadets gave Minho space, some of them nodding at her with new respect, some of them avoiding her eyes because they had laughed at Kieran's original mockery. Kieran realized that he was no longer certain of anything he had believed to be true about weakness, strength, or the species that populated the galaxy. And that realization was both terrifying and strangely compelling. 3 months after the inquiry, the Academy had changed. What began as a simple recognition of Minho's abilities had transformed into something much larger. The Academy's curriculum now included sections on meteorological training. The survival techniques that Minho taught were becoming standard for all cadets, and Kieran, the proud Vortaxian instructor who had mocked her so publicly, was spending his afternoons in a classroom learning the same lessons he had dismissed as irrelevant. Minho taught from a position in front of a large viewing screen that displayed images and videos from Earth. She showed storms that were so massive they could be seen from space. She showed humans in specially designed vehicles driving into the heart of these storms, collecting data, taking measurements, understanding the physics of weather systems that could destroy cities. Kieran watched with an expression that was difficult to read. His 4 eyes followed every movement on the screen. His mandibles clicked quietly as he processed information that contradicted everything he had been taught about what made a species strong. On Earth, Minho was saying to a room full of cadets and instructors who had volunteered to learn from her, "We do not run from danger. We study it. We learn from it. We understand that the most powerful forces in nature have patterns, and if you can learn those patterns, you can survive what others cannot. She played a video of a massive storm system forming over an ocean on Earth. The clouds rotated in a spiral pattern that was almost hypnotic. The wind speeds were measured in numbers that seemed impossible, and yet humans stood on the edges of this storm, measuring it, filming it, studying it. My family has recorded over 100 major storm events, Minho continued. Each one taught us something new. Each one helped us understand weather better. And because we understand weather better, we can predict it better. We can protect ourselves better, and we can help others who are in danger from these storms. After the class, several cadets approached Minho with questions. One was a Krillian who asked how humans first developed the ability to predict storms. Another was a Cathara who wondered if storm hunting was something that could be taught to other species. Kieran waited until everyone else had left the room before approaching her. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "Not just for what I said during the inquiry, for everything before that." Minho looked at him calmly. "You are apologizing now?" "Yes," Kieran said. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about humanity. I was wrong about what strength means." "You were not wrong about my physical strength," Minho said. "You were correct. I am not as physically strong as a Vortaxian. I cannot lift what you can lift. I cannot run as fast as you can run. I cannot fight you in direct combat and win." Kieran's mandibles clicked. This was not the response he expected. He expected her to accept his apology and move forward. Instead, she was agreeing with his original assessment. "But strength is not only physical," Minho continued. "You assumed that it was. You assumed that a larger body meant a stronger person. You did not consider that there might be other types of strength that matter in other situations. On my world, a storm chaser who is small and light is actually stronger than one who is large and heavy, because they are easier to carry away and harder to push down. Speed and agility matter more than size. Understanding the patterns of wind and pressure matter more than raw physical power." "I understand that now," Kieran said. "Do you?" Minho asked. "Or are you simply saying the words because Commander Valix ordered you to? Because I want to know if you truly believe that different types of strength exist, or if you are just pretending." Kieran was quiet for a moment. He thought about the videos he had watched. He thought about the storm that had nearly killed them on Vex 7. He thought about how Minho had moved through that chaos with the same calm he might have felt walking through a peaceful garden. "I believe it," he said finally. "I did not want to believe it, but after watching what humans can do, after seeing what you can do, I cannot deny it." "Then perhaps we can learn from each other," Minho said. "You have physical capabilities that my species does not have. You have the capacity to lift and carry things that I cannot. You have the ability to survive in environments that are too extreme even for me. Perhaps those are forms of strength that matter as well." Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. Kieran began visiting Minho's classes not just as a requirement from Commander Valix, but because he genuinely wanted to learn. And Minho, seeing that he was making a sincere effort to change his perspective, began to teach him with patience and detail. Kieran learned how to read weather patterns from basic measurements of temperature and pressure. He learned about atmospheric conditions and how they influenced storm formation. He learned about the dedication and courage it took to face down a massive weather system and not just survive, but study it. In return, Kieran invited Minho to observe his combat training classes. He showed her the tactical thinking that went into military strategy. He demonstrated how Vortaxian warriors analyzed an opponent's movements and adapted their strategy in real time. He explained that physical strength alone had never made anyone a good fighter. It was the combination of strength, speed, flexibility, and intelligent decision-making that created a true warrior. Minho watched and learned. She noticed how Kieran could predict an opponent's movement based on subtle shifts in their weight. She saw how he could adapt his strategy on the fly. She realized that in his own way, Kieran was doing the same thing she did with storms. He was reading the patterns in his opponent's movements and predicting what would come next. "We are not so different," she said to him one day after watching him defeat a much larger opponent through tactical superiority. "Perhaps," Kieran agreed, "but for a long time I believed we were completely different. I believed my way was the only way to be strong." Tara, watching this unlikely friendship form, smiled to herself. She had always believed that the Academy had something to learn from humanity. She was glad to see that Kieran was finally learning it too. By the end of the training cycle, the Academy had changed significantly. The curriculum now included environmental survival training as a mandatory part of the program. Minho had been promoted to full instructor status, making her one of the youngest instructors in the Academy's history. And Kieran, rather than being demoted or dismissed, had been kept on as an instructor with a specific focus on combining tactical analysis with the reading of environmental patterns. The two of them began teaching joint classes, combining Vortaxian combat theory with Earth's storm survival techniques. Cadets from across the galaxy attended these classes, and many of them began to understand that the universe was more complex and strange than they had previously believed. Strength was not simple. The galaxy was not simple. And the species that inhabited it were far more capable than most assumptions would suggest.